The first recorded alert came in on the night of September 14th, 2019, at exactly 12:42 in the morning, when the motion sensor inside room 12 of Hawthorne Elementary School activated despite the building having been officially closed for renovation for nearly 8 months. Its windows boarded, power limited to emergency circuits, and every entry logged and sealed by the district after the disappearance of 9-year-old Lucas Harrow the previous winter. A case that had begun as a routine missing child report and slowly decayed into something the town no longer discussed out loud, because no footprints were ever found in the snow outside the classroom where he was last seen. No sign of forced exit, no trace of blood, no disturbance of desks or chairs. Only his empty coat hanging on the back of his seat and his math workbook open to a half-finished page, as if he had simply stood up and stepped out of existence. At first, the security company assumed a malfunction. The building was old, wires brittle, and cold nights often triggered false positives. Yet the timestamp was precise. The sensor had been replaced only weeks earlier, and the system log showed sustained movement for exactly 1 minute and 12 seconds before returning to idle. Not a flicker, not a glitch, but a slow, continuous presence traveling across the room in a way consistent, with a person walking from the door toward the teacher's desk. When the second alert arrived the following night at 12:42 again, lasting nearly the same length of time, the technician assigned to overnight monitoring flagged it for review, pulling the archived blueprint of the school to confirm the sensor's location, which was mounted high in the back corner of room 12, angled to catch the full floor area where the children's desks once sat. And when the third alert came the next night, identical in timing, identical in duration, the district was notified, and a maintenance officer named Raymond Cole was dispatched to physically inspect the building just before dawn, arriving while the sky was still dark enough that the street lamps cast long yellow shadows across the playground swings that no longer moved. Raymond documented that all doors remained sealed, the chain locks intact, dust undisturbed along the base of every entryway, and the classroom itself untouched except for a thin film of construction debris, and the old chalkboard still bearing the date of Lucas Harrow's last day in class written in neat cursive, Thursday, January 17th. And though nothing appeared out of place, Raymond noted in his report that the air demonstrated a pronounced cold pocket around the center of the room, colder than the hallway or neighboring classrooms by several degrees, as though an unseen window were open despite all being boarded shut, a phenomenon he attributed to poor insulation, but underlined twice in pen for later review. The alerts continued every night without fail, always at 12:42, always lasting just over a minute, always originating from the same sensor. And after a week, the district authorized the use of internal security cameras that had previously been deactivated to save power during renovation, restoring electricity to the hallway and classroom system, and setting them to record during nighttime hours, expecting to capture nothing more than dust drifting or rodents passing through broken vents. Yet what the footage revealed introduced a different problem entirely, because while the motion sensor activated precisely as before, the camera feed displayed an empty classroom, no moving shapes, no shifting shadows, no visible intruder, only the stillness of overturned desks stacked against one wall, and the faint flicker of emergency lighting reflecting off the polished tile floor. Technicians reviewed the footage frame by frame, adjusting contrast, boosting exposure, slowing playback to fractions of speed. Yet nothing moved, though the sensor data insisted something had crossed the room, and the digital logs even mapped the motion in a pattern beginning near the doorway, progressing past where Lucas's desk had once stood, and stopping beside the teacher's podium. exactly the path a student would walk when being called to the front of class. It was during the 12th night that the sound anomaly first appeared, a faint audio pickup from the camera microphone, not loud enough to be noticed during live monitoring, but detectable in waveform analysis as a low-frequency vibration, beginning seconds after the sensor activated. A soft, repetitive noise that resembled fabric brushing against fabric or the gentle drag of shoes across tile, too rhythmic to be electrical interference, too consistent to be wind, lasting precisely as long as the motion reading before fading into silence. The district contacted local police, reopening the building at night for controlled observation, and on September 26, two officers, Sergeant Malcolm Reeves and Officer Leila Brenner, positioned themselves inside the hallway across from room 12 at 11:30 in the evening, sitting in folding chairs beneath flickering fluorescent lights, while body cameras recorded continuously. The building around them settling and creaking the way old structures do when temperatures drop, pipes knocking in distant walls, wood contracting, all normal sounds cataloged in the report. At 12:42, both officers noted a sudden temperature drop, so abrupt that Brenner later described it as stepping into open freezer air. And simultaneously, the motion sensor indicator light above the classroom door blinked red, and though they were watching the doorway directly, nothing emerged. No shadow passed beneath the gap, no sound of a door shifting. Only the quiet hum of electricity and that same faint dragging noise, this time audible enough to be recorded clearly, slow and deliberate, crossing the floor inside the room as though someone were pacing. Reeves drew his flashlight and opened the classroom door while Brenner covered the hallway, and the beam swept across the empty room, revealing nothing but stillness. Yet both officers reported the sensation of being observed from multiple directions, the cold intensifying near the center of the floor, where the sensor logs always indicated movement. And in that space, dust particles were swirling upward in a small circular pattern, as though displaced by a passing body, rising briefly before settling again. An effect captured faintly on camera, but not attributed to any identifiable air current. They closed the room, resumed their watch, and the motion ceased exactly 1 minute and 12 seconds after it began, just as it had every night before. Over the following days, the phenomenon repeated in the presence of additional witnesses, including maintenance staff, district officials, and another patrol unit. And each time the same sequence occurred: cold air bloom, sensor activation, faint movement sounds, empty visuals, and dust disturbance, until a forensic equipment team installed pressure-sensitive mats across the classroom floor, designed to register footsteps even without visible contact. On the night of October 2nd, the mats triggered in a pattern that mirrored a child-sized stride, beginning near the doorway, spacing consistent with someone under 5 feet tall, crossing past the spot where Lucas Harrow's desk had been positioned according to archived seating charts, and stopping at the front of the classroom, where the final pressure imprint lingered several seconds longer than the others, as though weight remained standing there before lifting away. No physical indentation appeared on the mats, only digital pressure readings, and yet the system recorded an approximate mass consistent with a small human body. It was after this night that archived footage was re-examined from Lucas's last school day, and investigators noticed something previously overlooked in the background of a classroom video, taken during a fire drill rehearsal earlier that afternoon. A dark vertical shape near the back of room 12 that did not resemble a person, yet appeared tall and narrow, like a shadow standing upright without a visible source, positioned exactly where the motion sensor was mounted months later. And as the students filed out of the room, Lucas hesitated briefly, looking not toward the door but toward that darkened area before stepping forward and vanishing from the frame. The shadow did not move. The camera cut away moments later. Following this discovery, the nightly movement began changing subtly, sometimes pausing near the center of the room longer than before, sometimes reversing direction halfway through its path as though uncertain, and the dragging sound grew more pronounced, heavier, layered now with a faint rhythmic tapping that analysts compared to fingers brushing against a hard surface, slow and searching. Thermal imaging installed mid-October captured a cold, humanoid outline during the activations, vaguely child-shaped yet elongated, limbs slightly too long, head tilted forward unnaturally. Its temperature several degrees lower than the surrounding air, drifting rather than stepping across the floor, stopping where Lucas's seat once stood before continuing to the front of the room and lingering as though waiting for instruction. On October 19th, the cold figure did not stop at the podium, but turned toward the classroom door where officers were stationed, and the pressure mats registered a new path leading directly toward them, each step heavier than the last, the dragging sound now unmistakably close. And as the door handle rattled softly, not violently, but with small repeated movements like someone testing it without strength, the thermal image flared briefly brighter before vanishing entirely. The motion ceased. The hallway temperature normalized within seconds. The handle stopped moving. No figure appeared. After that night, the alerts continued, but the movement always ended at the doorway, never again crossing the room fully, and the sound recordings captured something new layered beneath the dragging, a low, breath-like exhale occurring at irregular intervals, drawn out and weak, almost tired. It was during a routine review of school records that a custodian's report from the day Lucas disappeared resurfaced, noting that earlier that afternoon the janitorial closet adjacent to room 12 had been found unlocked with a mop bucket overturned, and a long dark smear of water leading across the hallway toward the classroom, ending abruptly at the threshold, though the floor inside the room remained dry, a detail initially dismissed as a spill cleaned by staff, but now reconsidered. Ground-penetrating radar was used beneath the classroom floor weeks later during renovation, and beneath the tile directly in front of the teacher's podium, a void was detected in the soil inconsistent with foundation design, prompting a controlled excavation that uncovered a collapsed section of old utility tunnel, no longer mapped in school blueprints. And within that narrow space lay the small skeletal remains of a child curled tightly against the dirt wall, one arm extended upward as though reaching, the bones fractured in multiple places consistent with a fall, and fragments of a dark fabric jacket, matching the one Lucas had worn on the day he vanished. The official conclusion stated that Lucas had likely fallen through a weakened section of flooring into the forgotten tunnel below, becoming trapped and succumbing before rescue, though how the collapse had sealed itself seamlessly without surface damage remained unexplained, and why no sound had been reported by classmates or teachers in the moments before his disappearance was left unanswered. After the remains were removed and the tunnel filled, the motion sensors were reset. That night, for the first time in over a month, no alert occurred at 12:42. The building remained silent. Renovations resumed. For several days, nothing happened. Then on October 26th, the sensor activated again, but not in room 12. This time it triggered in the main hallway outside the classroom, registering slow movement traveling away from the door, down the corridor toward the building's rear exit, each step measured, dragging, child-sized. The pressure mats relocated after construction, capturing faint impressions that grew lighter with each meter traveled, as though the weight was slowly lifting from the floor, fading rather than leaving. The cameras showed nothing. Thermal imaging displayed only a thin, cold streak retreating into darkness. The final sound recorded that night was not dragging, not breathing, but a soft single tap, like a small hand touching metal, followed by the distant creak of the rear exit door opening, though inspection minutes later confirmed it remained locked from the inside, chains undisturbed, dust intact. No further motion was ever detected in the school again. The sensors stayed silent permanently. Yet months later, when the renovated building reopened and students returned, several teachers independently reported that whenever they stood alone in room 12 after hours, they felt a cold draft rise near the front of the classroom and heard faint footsteps in the hallway moving away, slow and careful, always stopping just before the exit, as though something that had finally learned where it was trapped was now relearning how to leave. And though no alarms ever triggered again, maintenance logs quietly documented that every year on the anniversary of Lucas Harrow's disappearance, at exactly 12:42 in the morning, the hallway temperature dropped several degrees for just over 1 minute before returning to normal, with no recorded motion, no sound, and no visible cause. Only a brief unnatural cold passing through the building like something walking one last familiar path it no longer needed to follow.